was the most stunning unionization drive in American history, greater than anything that had ever happened before and greater than anything that has ever happened since. Within a year and a half, tens of millions of workers were organized in unions. And the unions went to the president and said, we've got millions of members that are very dissatisfied with what's going on. You better do something. Unions and union workers had voted for Roosevelt. They got him into office that first time. There was another kind of organization that exploded in America at that time too. This may surprise you even more. Socialist parties, several of them, and a communist party here in the United States grew very fast and had lots of influence and worked very closely with the CIO. They said that not only was the conditions of the mass of working people intolerable, but they said, we need system change. We need to get rid of capitalism because it's not working for most of us. We want socialism. And there were hundreds of thousands of these people, and they were well organized. They went to Roosevelt all together, CIO, socialists, and communists. And they said to him, you better do something because what's building in America is a revolution. And in case you're wondering what kind, look over to that other country. It used to be called Russia. Now it's called the Soviet Union. Because if you think it can only happen there, think again. And Roosevelt got scared. Because Roosevelt could see what everybody could see then, that these were not idle terms. These were not idle boasts. These were real. So here's what Roosevelt did. And by the way, Roosevelt came from the 1%. Very old, wealthy family. His relatives had been president before him, Teddy Roosevelt, etc. So what did Franklin Roosevelt do? He got together his rich friends that he came from, and the heads of the biggest American corporations, and he said to them, listen to me, gentlemen. Nowadays he'd have to say gentlemen and ladies, but in those days that hadn't happened yet. Just gentlemen. I'm going to tell you something you got to have to understand. We got two choices here, he says. We can stiff-arm all of these angry workers, these socialists and communists. We can ignore their demands that we do something for the mass of the people in this country. But if we do, they are going to try to make a revolution here, and I'm not sure they won't pull it off. And you can't be sure either, he said, looking them right in the face. He says, I got a plan. You give me a lot of money, you corporations, you rich people. You give me a lot of money as president. I'm talking big money. And I'm going to use it to really help the mass of the American people. I'm going to go to those unions and those socialists and those communists, and I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to do something for the mass of people in this crisis. On one condition, you got to stop talking about this revolution stuff. No more of that. No more pointing at the Soviet Union. No more talking socialism, communism. Leave the capitalist businesses alone. Leave them alone, and I'll get you help for the mass of people. And he went to the rich ones in the corporation, and he said, the only way I can give help to the mass of the people suffering at a time when government has no money is if you give me your money. And if you don't, you're going to have a revolution, and then you're going to lose everything. So I advise you to take my deal. Half of them did. He split the corporations and the rich. Half of them bought what he said. And they gave him the money. I'm going to tell you in a minute how they did that. They gave him the money. And guess what Roosevelt did with the money from the rich? One, in the middle of the Depression, he created the Social Security system. We never had that before in America. He went on the radio, no TV then, he went on the radio and he said, every American who spent a lifetime working, is 65 years of age or older, we, the government, are going to give these people money every month, a retirement for the rest of their lives. Most of these people had no retirement. Their jobs didn't provide that. They hadn't the money to save for a retirement. He created a retirement. In that act, he took care of the old people of America on a massive scale, and he made sure that the old people weren't a burden on their kids, who in a time of depression couldn't help them. Second thing he did, he created the unemployment compensation system. Any of you who've ever been unemployed through no fault of your own, you know you can go to a certain place and you get a check for 6 months, a year and a half, every week, an unemployment check. Because it's not your fault that you're unemployed in most cases. He created that. And here's the big one he created. Beyond those two, beyond Social Security, beyond unemployment. He went on the radio and he said, if the private capitalist sector of America cannot provide jobs for the millions of Americans who want to work, who need to work, then there's no alternative but for me in the government to do it. And between 1934 and 1941, Roosevelt created and filled 12.5 million federal jobs. He gave hope, a job, income to millions of American families, who thereby could make their mortgage payments and keep their home. Wow. At a time of depression, when there's no money, it turns out there is the money. And we know where the money was then, and that's where the money is now. It's in the hands of corporations and the rich. Roosevelt went and he got it. He used it to pay for Social Security, unemployment insurance, and federal jobs. Wow. And here's how it worked. Rich people in 1940s, 50s, and 60s, what was the income tax rate they had to pay the richest in America? Top income tax rate for rich people. Here's what it was. 91%. What does that mean? Every dollar over $25,000, a lot of money in those days, every dollar over $25,000 you earned in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, you had to give Uncle Sam 91 cents. You got to keep 9. You got it? What is it today? What is the top rate that the richest Americans pay today? Answer, 35%. Do you understand? The reason our government has no money is because over the last 50 years, the richest people in America have enjoyed a tax cut that drops what they pay from 91% to 35%. If you're not a rich person, you don't have, and you never got, nor did your parents, anything remotely like that. In 1945, for every dollar the federal government collected by income tax on people, it collected $1.50 in income tax from corporations. Today, for every dollar the federal government collects in income tax off individuals, it collects 25 cents from corporations. So what are the last 50 years? Taxes removed off of corporations onto people, and off of the richest people onto all of you. So on behalf of America's corporations and wealthy people, I want to say to all of you, thank you. Very kind. Thank you for paying right through the nose for a government that could not save you from an economic crisis you didn't cause. Okay, so what's the problem? The problem here is not that we don't have a CIO, a socialist, or a communist, although that would make things quite different. They have those things in Europe. What's the problem here? Well, let's go to the root of the problem. The problem are the corporations of America, the way we do business in America. Most business in America, most goods and services are produced in something called a corporation. And in the corporation, which does the business of America, here's how the decisions are made. Corporations are controlled by shareholders. You get one vote for every share you own in deciding what a corporation does. Not one vote per person, that's a democratic arrangement. One vote per share. So if you own 1 million shares, you get 1 million votes. If you own no shares, that's how many votes you get. Most of the workers in, and I could pick any corporation, I'll pick, say, IBM, just for illustration purposes. Most of the workers in IBM have few or no shares. They have, therefore, few or no votes. Most of you in this room have no shares of IBM, so you have no votes. Who has the votes? They're called major shareholders. Usually about a dozen people or institutions that own the block of the shares. So they have the bulk of the votes, and those votes entitle them to select the board of directors. That's the top group in any corporation. Usually numbers between 15 and 20 people. They make all the decisions. All the decisions. Let me give you an example. They decide what the company produces. So, for example, the board of directors decided that certain of the old GM cars are not going to be produced anymore. Can't get an Oldsmobile, they don't make them anymore. Instead, they make other things. So the board of directors decide what a corporation produces. Number two, a board of directors decides how the production is carried out. With dangerous chemicals or not? In a well-lit room or not? With terrible noise or not? Do you get benefits for working there or not? They also decide everybody's salary and wages and benefits. Wow. They also decide where production is going to happen. So they're the ones who decide, let's see, we're going to close this factory in the Bronx and open it in Shanghai. Is that their decision? Yeah. And here's the best part. 4 times a year, the board of directors gets together and decides what to do with the profits that all of the workers have helped to produce. And here's an example of what they've done over the last 50 years of this arrangement. Because you live with what they've done. Here's what they've done. They've taken those profits that corporations have earned, and they've decided to give a very small number of people at the top stupefying annual payments. They get stock options, and they get benefits, and they get bonuses, and wow, and you read about it. That's as close as most of you get. You read about, oh, this one got 22 million. This one got 200 million. Who decides that some people get all of that, whereas the mass of people have a hard time making their ends meet? That's the board of directors. They make that decision. They decide who gets the profits. Did they use all the profits for salaries for their people? No. Here's a second use they made. They decided that America as an economic system, and they figured this out years ago, was becoming more and more unequal. I used to have to take a lot of time to explain this, but thanks to the Occupy Wall Street movement, I don't have to do that anymore. I just use the term 1%, 99%, and everybody knows what I mean. This country was polarized over the last 30, 40 years between 1% becoming much more wealthy and the other 99%, not so much. Well, the 1% aren't stupid, and they understand you've got a problem in a society if you make a tiny number of people very rich and the average person having a hard time, because sooner or later the average people who aren't stupid either are going to figure out, wait a minute, I'm really getting the short end of the stick here in economics. The economy isn't good to me. Maybe I could and should use politics to reverse the effects of this economic system. If capitalism isn't good to me, maybe I can use a democratic political system where every person has a vote, not according to how much you own, just because you're a person. And maybe I can get the vast majority who are getting screwed in this economic system to use their majority power in the political system to offset what's happening, to diminish that inequality. The rich understood that perfectly, and they realized what they had to do. They had to make sure that the political system didn't work that way, that the political system did not allow the mass of people to undo the inequality produced in the economic system. And how did they do that? By buying the political system. You don't need me to explain that to you. You cannot run for office at the federal level in this country without millions of dollars. And millions of dollars do not come from people like you, because you don't have it. Millions of dollars come from people with a lot of money. And so politicians have to go and say things and do things that keep people with a lot of money happy. Otherwise, those people with a lot of money give it to their enemy, their opponent, in the next election, and their history. So the rich people made sure to fund the parties, to fund the candidates, to fund everything about it, to create think tanks where they can shape how people think about everything. Make sure the media look and sound the way they do. Keep the system going the way it is, because for them, it's working well. That's why leaders keep trying trickle-down economics, even though nothing trickles down. That's why we're in the mess we're in. We've got to go to the question of who makes the decisions. And the answer is the board of directors and the major shareholders. They have the power, they have the wealth. They wanted us in good times to give them lots of applause. We are the captains of industry. We are the entrepreneurial geniuses. All of that. Nice. When the economy's looking good, you want the credit. Problem is, Jack, that when the economy turns bad, you gotta take the blame. And right now, it's very bad. And looking back 5 years, it's been bad. And looking back 30 years, it's been getting bad. So let's blame where it belongs. And it isn't on them as individuals. If you took the top corporate executives, the top bankers, and you threw them all in jail as some people want, what do you think the next crop of bankers right below them who took over their jobs, what would they do? The same thing, because they're subject to the same rewards, the same punishments, the same economic system. You want to change behavior, you got to change the system. How would we do it? And what would changing the system mean? I call the answer, and the title of this book, in which all these arguments are developed much more fully than I can do here, Democracy at Work. What do I mean? I mean, well, and I can say this especially to an American audience, we're supposed to be a country committed to democracy. And by democracy, we're supposed to mean that if you're affected by a decision, then you have the right to participate in making that decision. That's the theory that underlines voting. Since we're affected by what the mayor, the senator, the president does, we have a role in choosing that person and in thereby supporting or opposing whatever it is he or she does. Well, if we believe in democracy, then I got news for you. Something is wrong. Why? Because we don't apply democracy, we don't have democracy where we work. And where we work is where we spend most of our lives as adults. 5 out of 7 days you go to work. And you work the best hours of the day. And you're either getting dressed for work, or you're traveling to work, or you're doing the work, or you're returning from work, or you're recouping yourself from work. But work is what you do most of the time. So if you believe in democracy, tell me please, how did it come to be that when you go to work, and most Americans work for corporations, you do what you're told by the board of directors, you do it with whatever equipment they decide for you to use, you do it wherever they decide to do it, and the profits your labor helps to produce, they decide what to do with it, you decide nothing. What kind of democracy is this? It isn't. Capitalism as an economic system and democracy as a political system are like oil and water. They don't mix. And that's hard perhaps for you to face. But think about it. So what would be the solution? I've got a very American solution. Bring democracy to the workplace. And what would that mean? Well, it's something that people have been doing for thousands of years, including many Americans. But they have a different name for it. They call it cooperative enterprise. Here's how it works. The people who come to work, who use their brains and muscles from 8 in the morning till 5 in the afternoon, Monday through Friday, they also get to make the decisions. They don't just do a particular task, they are also part of the board of directors. Here's a way, just one of many, that you might organize it. Monday to Thursday, you come to work and do your particular task. Friday, you come to work, you don't do your particular task. You sit around in meetings with all the other workers, and you discuss what to produce, how to produce, where to produce, and what to do with the profits. You democratize the enterprise. You democratize the economy. And why do I think that would be a solution? Because I think if the workers together made these decisions, we would have an entirely different economic, political, and cultural life, we Americans. Let me just give you a few tantalizing examples of what might happen. Let's begin with how we produce. If a board of directors located in New York has to decide what technology to use, oh, I don't know, in Ohio someplace, in a factory, or an office, or a store, and suppose they learn that this technology, using these machines and these chemicals, say to clean the machines or to clean the floor, are profitable because they're cheap, but they're not very good for the health of people who breathe the fumes. The board in New York has to maximize the money, that they're in it for the business. That's what capitalism is. They would decide to go with the toxic technology because it's profitable. But suppose a decision was made by the workers who work at that place. You know what they would decide. They're not going to sacrifice their health for a couple of percentage points of profit. They're not going to do it. Let me give you another example. If the workers themselves ran the enterprise, how likely do you think it would be that they'd shut down the factory in Brooklyn and open another one in Shanghai? Destroy their own jobs? Destroy their families? Destroy the community? Hobble the economy here in order to make a little more profit for the company by exploiting cheaper Chinese workers? I don't think so. Let me give you another example. Suppose it came time to decide what to do with the profits. Do you think the collected workers would decide to give tens of millions to a handful of people and everybody else gets nothing? Or would they be more likely to spread it out a little bit? You know the answer. Our economy would work differently. Everything about our economy would work differently. And I think if you go through it, the decisions that would be so differently made if we had actual democracy at work on the job would make for a different society. One short example. If the workers are going to have to be bosses as well as workers, because that's what we really say, then the school curriculums would have to change. Everybody, every worker would have to learn how to be a director, how to know the broad things about a society that allow you to make good decisions, not just about the little task you do, but about the whole future of that enterprise. What's going to be produced? How is it going to be produced? What new designs? What new technology? Workers are now, for the first time, going to get the education they always should have gotten. I, personally, just to drive the point home to you on a personal level, I am the product, Kathy didn't mention it to you, I am the product of Harvard, Stanford, and Yale. Those are the only universities I ever went to. I am a product of elite American education. We were told, in my 10 years going through those universities, we were told over and over again, you are going to lead this country, you're going to run this country. That's what we were told. Sure, we were learning biology and math and economics, and just like you. But we were being told something very different along the way. And we were taught in a different way. We were going to be the ones who run the show. If you had democracy at work, you'd all be told, because that'd be part of your job. You'd all be directors, as well as whatever particular task you do. Let me leave you with this thought. It may strike you as strange, but again, I remind you, co-ops which work like this have been a feature of the American economy in the past, and they are now, all over this country. And I can give you examples if you're interested. And all over the world as well. So if you think it can't be done, it has been. If you think it can't succeed, it already has. The question is whether the American people are ready to throw out the taboo against questioning and challenging capitalism, to begin to explore alternatives like democracy at work. If they are, we will, and we'll all be better for it. If Americans have a chance to see how that kind of enterprise would be. If you had a chance to get a job in that kind of an enterprise, would you rather do that than be another cog in a top-down bureaucratic capitalist corporation? I think most of you would. But now you don't have much of a chance, because we don't have the freedom of choice of choosing. We ought to. We ought to have had it for a long time. But if we don't do it, we will be staying with a capitalist economy that is going down, and not for the short term, for a long one. There is no end in sight, And this crisis is 5 years old, and we live in a capitalist system that has these crises over and over again. If nothing else, what I've tried to suggest to you is the country needs you, your generation, to take up the questions we were afraid to ask and to push for the discussions and the honest evaluation of real alternatives to make something better for everybody, including each of you. Thank you very much.
Professor Wolff is going to take some questions, but I forgot to announce that this is the first talk of the year from the economics, the John Jay Economics Justice Series, Speaker Series, that's what it is. And so we'll be having many more of these, so please watch and listen to your teachers, and they'll come. And so we'll take questions now from anybody?
Can you make a comment about Bainsport? Freeport,
Tell me
Illinois.
about it, I don't know.
It's the company Sensasha that's owned by Bain's Capital.
No, I can tell you about what Bain's Capital as an enterprise does. Bain's Capital, you mean Romney's
Right.
firm? Yes. I assume most of you know that the Republican candidate, Mitt Romney, is associated with Bain Capital, a major Wall Street firm that he worked for most of the years before he became a candidate. And Bain Capital, which is similar to other firms of this sort, is a firm that basically collects investors' money, well, mostly very rich investors, who put in millions of dollars, or tens of millions of dollars. And then what Bain Capital does with that money is basically look for corporations that are often having difficulties of one kind or another, and Bain comes in, buys the corporation, and then carves it up into different pieces, sells different pieces to other investors, often in other countries, trying to figure out a way to make money off of the pieces and reconstructing it that couldn't be made by the old leadership of the company before they went and bought it. They often do this with borrowed money. That is, they get investors' money, on top of that they borrow money, and then they scavenge, it's often called, other corporations. In the process, of course, and that's what's got them into trouble, they often take a company that they don't think is making money and close it down, using its assets or the land it owns as part of a package of another deal with another company. So their job is ruthlessly and simply to make money with their money.